it's not essentially saying that it's Reagan's fault, but certainly many of the ties that held these particular structures together were undone in the 80s. So there are what are now called Minsky cycles. So in a Minsky cycle, we have displacement, a boom, a euphoria, profit-taking. Now, you can apply this to anything, but I think it would be instructive if we all thought about the property sector in Ireland right now. So displacement, where did the displacement come? It came in the early 2000s, definitely. We had the publication of the Bacon report and the subsequent ignoring of that report. I know, lads, no. I know, come on, go on to that. Cheap interest rates post-September the 11th cause a boom. Construction sector leads to euphoria. You cannot switch on a TV for 5 years without some D4 going, here's what I did with my house. You know, come on. There's euphoria going on. Now, there really aren't that many programs out there that interesting. Profit-taking, this happened throughout the early 2000s. By 2005, it seems that most of the smart money in developing was actually moving abroad to China. Just from talking to some people recently, it seems like that's what was happening. And finally, panic. This would be when George Lee starts coming in. This is probably, I would probably say number 5, you can probably call it. That's when George Lee starts coming in. Panic. Or you can date it around August 2007. That's when things really start kicking off. But some colleagues in the room know a lot more about the Irish property sector than me, so I'm not going to put an exact date on it. So, here's an example. This is just something it's not on the slides there, sorry, I just found it this morning on the way up. You can see here's property-related lending. This is from the central bank's website and from their latest monthly statistics. This line here shows property-related private sector credit coming out, and this is total private sector credit. So you can see that there has been a boom here. From 2003 quarter 1 to 2009 quarter 1, it's clear that there's something weird going on. Yeah, but I didn't need to show you the chart. I just found it cool. You all know that there's been a boom. You all know that there's been a bust. And I hope you all know that in 15 years' time, I'll be a little fatter, a little grayer, but I'll be going, and there was a boom and a bust in 2010. It's going to happen again. The sad thing is it really will happen again, if Minsky's right. All of which gives us a lovely frame in which to discuss corporate governance. Now, what is it? Governance, this is the sort of standard textbook. Governance concerns the exercise of power through policies enacted by self-interested agents working within institutions. So we can talk about corporate governance, which is obviously all about how companies and corporate entities manage themselves, but also we can talk about how those corporate entities interface with one another. The late J.K. Galbraith, his son Jamie Galbraith, was actually here a couple of weeks ago. He bemoaned the fact, and he said that the current struggle, the most interesting thing that's going to happen to us as a society in the late 20th and early 21st centuries is the clash of big government and big organizations, big profit-taking organizations. The culture of corporatism is the big struggle, and it's the one in which we are most likely to find ourselves on one side or the other, and it's also the one in which we are a lot less theoretically prepared to deal with, because the intellectual theory that economists and others like us espouse is a theory of animistic competition. So we don't have the tools for which to smack the particular nail into the particular wood. So I've said this before. All of this has happened before, and it will happen again. We're in the midst of a cycle, and we're going to have to rebuild it again. But I really don't want to get into how bad our Irish economy is, and distribute razor blades for all and something. There's no need. There's no need. You all know it. But I think the point about it is that here's a partial list, and this is off the top of my head. The U.S. stock market crash of '87, Japanese real estate and stock market crisis in the 90s, UK housing crashes in 91 and 92, which is fascinating. I find that one the most interesting. They had a housing crash in 91, 92. They had another one, not 20 years later. I find that absolutely fascinating because it's the same people. It's not even a different generation. Mexican peso crisis in 94, Russian crisis more or less the entire 90s, the East Asian crisis in 97, bursting of the dot-com bubble in 2000, worldwide recession, and the Argentinian currency crisis, and finally the subprime crisis. That's not a complete list, it's not an exhaustive list, it's just what I could think of on the day when I wrote this book chapter. I should say as well, as an aside, this is all based on a book chapter that has appeared in Ronan Keane and Alva O'Neill's latest book, the former Chief Justice Ronan Keane and Alva O'Neill, their book called Corporate Governance in Ireland, an Irish Perspective. So that was just published this month. But I've sent you the book chapter, and that should be available on the CFA's website
probably within the week.
But you can get it from my website now, if you're really bored and want to start reading it. Okay. Yes. Okay. So all this has happened before and will happen again. We are in the midst of this. But it's almost so obvious, you feel a bit stupid saying it. It's like asking accountants if they can count to 3. It's like, banking is risky. It should be regulated. People are incentivized to make dodgy trades. Because if it comes off, you're a hero. That's enough for me. That's enough for me. I'm going to take that risk. It must be regulated. But by whom? Well, since 2003 in Ireland, the FSAI has been running, so-called, our regulatory environment. And the remit of it, and I find this fascinating because this is the remit in law, is to license, liaise with, and monitor, crucially monitor, the activities of licensed agents in the financial services sector, and to ensure that they act in the public interest according to legal strictures. Now, there's 2 important bits to that little part. The first is it's supposed to monitor. It's supposed to monitor what's going on. I don't think there's a person in a room who believes that they really monitored what was going on in the most strict way. But finally, they're supposed to monitor according to legal strictures, and they did that. They did that. There's no one going to go to jail because they didn't follow the rules. Which all leads me to where I live, in Limerick. I live in a small town called Maru, and to get to Maru, you have to drive on some really frightening roads. You're going to go, there are those roads. There aren't really signposts, but it's actually a complete right angle. You know those roads? On those roads is a speed limit, and the speed limit is 80 kilometers an hour. Now, if you actually drove at 80 kilometers an hour, you would kill yourself, everyone in the car, and most likely half the sheep that you crashed into. Right? So you can drive at 77.8 kilometers per hour. You're not safe, but you are within the rules. You're not. No cop is going to pull you over and say, "Here, buddy, stop." But you are certainly not being safe. So it is quite possible to live within legal strictures as long as they're light and as long as they're easy. I would argue that the legal strictures in Ireland, with respect to corporate governance and with respect to lending policy, are a bit like the 80-kilometer sign. I think we just had a little bit too wide bands. So who should lend and why? Lending by banks should be for productive profit-making activities. This is the economist's view, but I mean, it's very difficult to say that to a banker. They should be for productive activities. They're not really. It's not clear that the practice of lending for investment in property was that. It's really not clear. It's certainly not clear from the stats that we've looked at in the past. But it's very easy, and it's a curse really as an economist, because you look back and you go, aha, look at my line. It goes like that, clear bubble. When you're in the middle of the line, it's very difficult to see that. Yeah, it's very easy to look back and go, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that. But it's equally easy. It's too tempting to allow that to happen, but it's very easy to look forward and say, well, look, maybe we shouldn't allow this to happen again. So could property investment, based on the expectation of ever higher increases in the value of property, be considered a productive activity? Yes, in the short run. In the medium run, maybe not so much. Okay, it was a redistributive activity, I believe, where the future incomes of borrowers are transferred to the present to finance loans for mortgages on residential and commercial properties, because the construction boom spent most of its time in the 4th stage of the Minsky cycle, the profit-taking move. Because you had plumbers with 4 houses, 3 of them that they bought to flip. Yeah, so there are definitely profit-taking activities going on in this sector. So who should lend and why? I think it's important. Governance and remuneration is a clear principal-agent problem. The principal-agent problem is a very old problem in economics, and it's well studied. We understand it from the point of view of your doctor and you. Your doctor, you want your doctor to act as if they were you in that situation. But they're not. They're somebody who you